Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to another live show, and welcome to our Lenten read along wrap up. So, today we are going to be discussing The Long Loneliness by Dorothy Day. So, if you've read along with us, I hope you'll share your thoughts in the chat. And if you haven't, I hope that we can intrigue you about this autobiography. So, one of our co-hosts, Faith, we're hoping she's able to make it. It's a busy day for her on Palm Sunday. Hi, Stormy, Florida. Welcome. And Christina's here. Hello.
Yeah, our Catholics aren't here.
Yeah, our Catholics aren't here. That's a good point. So we're really hoping Faith can make it.
Yeah.
Emma's here.
Hello. How are
you? We're good. How was your Palm Sunday?
Good. Lovely.
Awesome.
Okay. So since Faith isn't here, and since some of us have not grown up in liturgical churches, can you explain the whole the tradition of Palm Sunday for us non-liturgical people?
Yeah.
Put you on the spot.
So actually just today I'm visiting DC this weekend, and so I just went to Palm Sunday Mass at the National Shrine, which is like the biggest Catholic church in North America. It's so gorgeous. It was such a beautiful.
Hi. How is everybody?
Good. Emma was just explaining Palm Sunday for us.
No, we were just talking about Palm Sunday and what it is. But so basically it's the Sunday before Easter, and it's the commemorating when Christ entered Jerusalem, and all the people, had palm branches and greeted him with cries of Hosanna. So there's a longer than usual gospel reading where we kind of read through the whole story of Holy Week from the entrance into Jerusalem, and then the Last Supper, and then up through Good Friday, dying on the cross. So this is quite a longer sermon, and then it's just the start of Holy Week, because then Holy Thursday, and it's called the Easter Triduum. Usually there are lots of services: Holy Thursday, Good Friday, through to Easter Sunday.
Yep, I agree with everything she just said. The reading is so long that the lady in front of me fainted.
Oh no!
It was so crowded in the church, and the poor lady, oh my gosh, they had to come up with a wheelchair, and because it's a very long reading. You're reading that whole passage. Well, this year it was from Mark.
So oftentimes they have different people saying different parts too. The priest will be the part of Christ, but the part of the crowds, you as the congregation. So you have to shout, "Crucify him!" It's really. And they give out palm branches. Actually, I have my palm branch right here. They give out palm branches that the priest blesses.
I gave my palm branch away. Because I'm a Eucharistic minister, so I take the Eucharist to a woman who's actually Byzantine Catholic. They don't do palms; they do pussy willows. But I brought her my palm, and she's very old, and it's sad.
Well, that's so nice. I bet that meant a lot.
But I gave away my palm. And then we have forgotten the last couple of years to burn our palms. We burn our old palms, and then you replace them with the new ones.
We always put them in the fireplace when we're done with them to remember. So
that's what we do too. That's exactly what we do. Yeah. Must be
the priests at the National Shrine had these beautiful, they were almost like bouquets of palms with a flower and some things that they all were carrying down the altar. If you search the National Shrine on YouTube, you can watch the stream of the Palm Sunday.
That's what this lady watches. She's always watching.
That's so cool. I was in the congregation today. So
you were. Oh my gosh, you're not very far from us. Where are you? I live in Northern Virginia. I'm like I don't know.
I'm staying with a friend by CUA.
Okay. All right. That's wonderful. My daughter just graduated from CUA. So yeah. I know that area well. So that's cool. That's really cool.
Faith, can you explain the significance of the palms and the Passover.
Yeah.
tradition.
For the palms and Passover?
Yeah, because that's part of the Passover celebration. They have the palm. I mean, it wasn't just, it was a part of the Passover observance. That
I'm
was
not
why.
familiar with that. I'm not familiar with that. The palms were for honoring him as a king, entering into Jerusalem.
Yeah, but it was part of, it was coming into Passover, and that
Right.
was, they had. I should ask my Jewish friend. She knows. It's I can't remember what it's called. It's like it's not only the palms, but it was some other things that they had with that to wave. So it was, they didn't just go and get it because Jesus of Nazareth was coming. It was part of the Passover observance as a
Like
whole.
maybe they had it in their home because they were using it in the celebration.
I mean, it was part of of the Passover observance.
I
I
think
thought her
it's
husband
so
would
odd
know that because he's Jewish.
My husband is Jewish and his family's Jewish, and I've never heard of that. Never. So maybe it was something at the time, but then maybe it's not like an Ashkenazi thing.
Or
later.
I wonder how the pussy willows too were palms versus pussy willow. But you said that it's pussy willows in the Byzantine Catholics. I wonder how that emerged.
Well, I think a lot of Byzantine are like Eastern Europe. And so maybe that they didn't have palms, they had pussy willows.
They may do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I guess it's Sukkot. It's a Lulavim. This is the Festival of Booths. Maybe it had something to do with the different observances of the different. I have to.
Oh, you keep popping like your microphone is going in and out for me.
Yeah, sorry. I won't move. So that's what's going on. I just thought of that while she was talking, but there was some sort of connection. But the different sects of Judaism would observe things differently. So I don't know. Maybe it had something to do with that. But yeah, there is the palms themselves.
Is she like North African or Middle Eastern or something? Maybe that's different from, say, the Ashkenazis, because they did get a lot of really European influence. So
no, she's. I mean, the friend that I'm talking about, she's not Christian. She's Jewish. She
right.
I learned took Hebrew from her. So
wow.
She
I've just never heard that. So you learn something.
Okay,
I mean, she didn't
just
tell me about the
Googled it.
connection.
Yeah. It was the same day they chose. I just Googled it, and this is just the first hit that shows up on Google, so I haven't researched it. But it says palm fronds were used to make baskets to gather and hunt for good things. And then, so it was like kind of a sacrifice for them to lay them at Christ's feet. That's just the first Google hit. So we're not. But
This
is
is
so
something
lit.
I researched. I'll have to research this.
Yes, please do.
We've never. I mean, there's other symbolisms, that overlap from Passover, of course, especially I would say with Catholicism, because the Mass is basically a Passover. I mean, that's what it is. It's the Passover, supper. It's the Last Supper. So there is a lot of crossover stuff, or not crossover. We stole it basically from the Jews, but
inherited it.
I mean, it's an outcropping of further development. But I haven't heard that about palms, so that's really interesting.
This is so awesome because in our service, I think the only mention of Palm Sunday was just that, the palms, people threw palms on the ground when Jesus was first coming into the city, and then 5 days later they executed him. So that was the only mention we had. We didn't have any special readings. We were just talking about 2 Peter today.
Oh, can I ask you something, Emma? Because I don't know if this was just our diocese or if it was just my pastor, but they put out a little booklet so that everybody could read along with the gospel today, because it was so long. And they had, I wish I had it with me, they had a beautifully written explanation about why you can't use this as an excuse to be anti-Semitic. And it was tucked right into it, saying, we don't condemn. You can't condemn all Jews. You can't condemn
Jesus
Jews
was a
today
Jew.
for what
Yeah,
they did. Yes, Jesus was
it's
a
through
Jew.
the Jews that we have Jesus.
Right. And so, so it was like, and I just wonder, was that my pastor? Which it would be like him to do something like that, or it would also be like the bishop to say, hey, on this Palm Sunday, since there's such a rise in anti-Semitism, let's put a little reminder in there.
I didn't see
but
that.
I don't know. You didn't see that? Okay.
No.
All right.
So I'm so glad we all made it here today. So do we want to just like briefly introduce our channel so that if anybody is new here and doesn't know your channel, they can check you out. Hi, Tatiana. And Dream in the Gardens here as well. Welcome. And we also have Philip here who says, I'm not familiar with the Richard Dawkins atheist scale, but we're so glad you're here, Philip.
It sounds like it's definitely an atheist scale.
Yeah.
Does that mean you're less of an atheist, or you're like, is number one like absolutely
I think Dawkins is very atheist, so that I would think would be very
very high. But he thinks the King James Bible should be required reading.
Oh yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Okay. So this is what Mark put. So interesting.
The poem was a symbol of
thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because they were waiting like for the king. I mean, that makes sense, doesn't it? They used it to celebrate the coming of the king.
Yeah. Oh wow!
I kept thinking of our last readathon. Was that Advent or Lent? I'm losing track of the seasons now. Of Dorothy Sayers, The Man Born to Be King, because that was so fascinating the way she rolled in the Palm Sunday and like the finding of the donkey and the finding of the room was like a whole like part of sort of the plot and the idea of the nationalism and the Jews expecting this like, warrior Messiah to come and lead them, and what everyone expected. Like Dorothy Sayers, I thought just did such a spectacular job examining all of that. And so like I still think of that Man Born to Be King all the time. I need to re-listen to it.
So that was made it really like a double, it was kind of like a double throwdown almost like on Palm Sunday if they were, I mean, it was really riling things up then.
Yeah.
Mm.
Now, was it a symbol back then, or is it the symbol now? That's the other thing. It's been a long time, so things change.
It's been a little while.
Yeah.
Just 1,000 or 2,000 years.
Yeah, we'll have to research that. That's a research thing. And then also, okay, I didn't know like until I moved to Texas that about Ash Wednesday. So the ashes are isn't it from the palms from Palm Sunday the year before? Okay.
Yeah.
Low church. We are low church.
Low church, yes.
So we're so glad you're here, Faith, because Carla reminded me we should ask you to tell us your experience with the long loneliness, because it's definitely my first experience reading Dorothy Day, and you were the one that I heard about her from. So
yeah. But we should go around and introduce. Weren't you starting to do that?
Oh yeah, we were, weren't we?
Yeah, let's do that.
Thank you for the reminder.
Yeah, sorry.
I totally forgot. Go ahead, Carla.
I'm Carla. I'm with I have my channel Raised to Walk, and I usually do Bible studies and talk about books. I've been on a little bit of a hiatus lately, but Christy always invites me to these things, and so is this like year 3 or 4 that we've been doing?
Yes.
Easter and Christmas.
I think
it's the second Lent. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That was our third Christmas and second Lent.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay. Yeah. So this is our tradition now.
Yes. I'm so glad you're here, Carla. Do you want to go, Victoria?
Sure, I'm Victoria. My channel is A Musical Bookworm, and on my channel, I read probably mostly fiction, but when I do read nonfiction, it tends to be faith-based, I feel like. So, read some good ones this year, and I'm excited to have this one under my belt because I had never heard of Dorothy Day actually before this. So I'm happy that you invited me along.
Always. Yeah, your number one book this year so far, or was it last year? Of the winter has been Joy in Christ's Presence by Spurgeon. So that's exciting.
Yeah, that's a great book.
Faith, would you like to introduce yourself and your channel?
Oh, yes. My name is Faith. And what should I say? I read, I love theology, but it takes me a long time to read it. And nonfiction as well. It always takes me long. And then I love all kinds of fiction from, I'm mostly backlisted. I don't really like modern stuff. I very seldom read new stuff. I like backlisted stuff, classics. Right now I'm in a Nancy Drew read along. I mean, the bar is set pretty low. but yeah, and that's what my channel's about. And every once in a while I'll throw in something about gardening because I like to garden.
Yes, you've been vlogging a little bit. It's been exciting.
Yeah, I did a tiny bit about cooking because I'm getting older and I'm having issues. I have to experimenting with diets that will help me. But yeah.
So Emma, would you like to go next?
Yeah. So I'm Emma. My channel is called Bookish Princess. I do a lot with books. I'm co-hosting the Alcott April readathon next month, which should be really fun. But yeah, I'm a Roman Catholic. My faith, I feel like, is like the deepest part of me. And it's always present in my reading. And there's some of my favorite books that I read are theology and the works of the saints. Which like last All Saints Day in November, I was like, oh, I should plan like a whole calendar of like saint reading. But like, then I was like, that would be a lot. So I feel like these readathons, like something to mark Lent and Advent with a book, has been really, really lovely.
Yes. In this book, is this the first book I've read by like a Catholic? It might be like the first book that I've read by a Catholic. That's
well, you've read Tolkien, right?
About her faith. Yes, I've read.
But like a nonfiction.
Like a nonfiction, yeah. I have read Tolkien's essays, so I've probably read like essays previously, but not like a whole book. So she mentioned when she figured out why Catholics will have like things from the saints. They're like, because if you love someone, you want things that belonged to them close to you. And I thought, oh, light bulb moment.
Exactly.
So learning about the saints.
It's like they're your friend, honestly. I feel like the saints like come up and tap you on the shoulder when they want to talk to you. I feel like John Paul II recently, like I've been reading some of his encyclicals and some of his books. But yeah, I loved when Dorothy Day talked about that. Yes. And maybe to go back to your question of why read The Long Loneliness, I feel like for me, so like Dorothy Day is not a saint right now, but there are some Catholics who would like her to be a saint, who are kind of petitioning for that. And like I have some friends who feel that way. So I one of the reasons I wanted to reread this, I read this back in like 2017, 2018, and I really enjoyed it, but like it didn't like make a strong impact. So I was excited to reread it just to like feel like, well, do I think she's like, how does this work measure up to the works of other saints? Like, what was her life all about? So yeah, I found it really fascinating.
Can you explain that for us non-Catholics? Because the whole saint thing is like we find it a little weird.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And Faith, please feel free to chime in here. But basically, a saint is someone in heaven. So basically, hopefully many of our loved ones and, people who have passed away are saints. And we'll find out when we get upstairs. But within the tradition of the church, there are some individuals whose lives were so holy, and I'm not familiar with the like exact criteria, but like there's usually like signs and miracles that are attributed to that saint. Like someone prayed for healing to this individual, and then the healing came miraculously, but also from their works, especially like, Thomas Aquinas, Augustine, all these, many of the saints are doctors of the church. So like their writings were so holy and so, reliable, and that they're doctors of the church. But basically the church goes through this whole process of like, there's kind of a checklist, and first you're beatified, and then kind of there's like, they think about it more and research it more and compile things. And then you are oh, my brain is not working. What's the word?
Canonized.
Canonized. Thank you.
Yes.
Then you're canonized, and then you're officially a church, or officially a saint. So basically, it's the church saying so that this individual, we're like what basically 99.9% certain they are in heaven and they are a saint. But technically speaking, a saint is anyone in heaven. So there are lots of saints.
We all want to be saints.
Right. We're all aiming to be saints. That's the only way you get into heaven. The goal is for everyone to become a saint, but it's like these people are so holy that we're like pretty much as confident as we can be. The church is that they are in heaven.
So. I would say they were so full of God's grace that they really modeled for us how to live. They imitated Christ, and they're sort of a kind of a closer, what's the word, degree, you know, like that Kevin Bacon and the 6 degrees or whatever. It's just like a little bit closer degree of a model of how to really, you know, be Christ-like in their particular situation, you know, whatever it was.
And knitting books with the servant of God and the petition, that's true too. I feel like it's like you made an impact on so many people's lives that there's a petition to make this person a saint.
Yeah.
So it's basically these are people whose lives have proved that you've seen, you know, it's recognized that they did actually.
Yeah, it's just a recognition of just the few, you know, that the church has really, the church really studies their lives. They get all this evidence from people who knew them. It can take years and years of research before they finally it's a long process. And so usually, sometimes somebody is so beloved and everyone acknowledges how holy they were, but usually it's a long process.
So this totally other topic. Did Hildegard of Bingen ever?
Now she is not. She never went through the official canonization, but through tradition and custom, she's considered a saint. Okay. But she never did go through. So there's all sorts of little, you know, vagaries. It's not like everything.
Because they've been doing this for a long time. So you know,
it's changed over the years, and yeah. But she's a doctor of the church. So she was never officially canonized, but she's a doctor of the church.
Interesting. So, I there's a contributor to an Unexpected Journal, Teresa Peel, and she's one of the interviews that we did with her. The other person that was supposed to be there wasn't able to make it, and so she kind of just talked the whole time. It was about her. She tells a story about how she has a particular, I think they're African saints, an African saint that's her prayer partner. She explains the story about how God told her that this saint was her prayer partner. So it was an interesting story. So it's like one of those things, like, especially, you know, coming from very, I didn't even realize that I had been in Calvinist churches like almost my entire life. Okay. And I'm not getting into that. I'm just saying it's like when you look at the furthest rejection of Catholic tradition and practices, you know, you're talking about Reformed Calvinist churches, and that's the kind of churches I had been in my whole life. So it's like understanding, like, just kind of all that is just like a complete different, you know what I mean? You just have to,
it's a different approach. Yeah. And Christina just said, and there's even something called the devil's advocate. You've heard of that expression? Well, that's actually true. It's somebody who in the church tries to convince you this person isn't a saint, gathers evidence to, it's literally like a court case. You decide, there you go. And then there are the devil's advocate that try to oppose. Yeah. So it's a very exacting process that they go through usually. Now, I personally, we shouldn't get into this because we should talk about the long loneliness. But you want me to tell you my story? I do have a little bit of a back story to the long loneliness. So, and Dorothy Day. So I found out about Dorothy Day from my college advisor because he had put up a newspaper article about her death. She died in 1977. I graduated in 1978. And I was reading the article about her. And so when when it was my appointment time, and he opened the door, I said, wow, this is so interesting about this woman. Who's this? She was so fascinating. And so he's like, oh, Dorothy Day. And he like was a big fan of Dorothy Day. And so he was telling me all about her. And that's how I first heard of her. But then I guess I was talking to my parents and they said, oh yeah, your grandfather knew her. I go, what? So there are actual newspaper articles. I can't find the one that's not in the Catholic Worker. But if you go back to old Catholic Workers, there are a few that mention my grandfather, who was John Brophy. He was a labor leader. And he was also a devout Catholic. And a couple of times they misspell his name. Like one time they called him John Brody, and another time they misspelled Brophy. But anyway, so their editor wasn't too, you could tell it was a volunteer newspaper. But anyway, and I always wondered why didn't my parents talk about Dorothy Day? So anyway, what happened was I got inspired to read this book, and I barely remembered it. But at the time, because I had gone through a long period of really feeling atheistic, agnostic, really doubting, thinking that God was just something people made up because they wanted comfort. You know, they were afraid to die, so they made up this God, that, you know, the whole thing. And I really, really deeply, in a very emotional way, couldn't accept. I was agnostic. On bad days, I was an atheist. But this was one of I sort of read myself back to the church in a way. And this was one of the books that influenced me. And I remember being very influenced by it, even though I didn't remember a lot about it the second time I read it. But what happened was when I came back into the church, I came back through a very left-wing organization called Pax Christi, which was a nonviolent resistance Catholic movement. And that's how I came back to the church. And so it was very, very influenced by her. And I hung out with people who were at the Catholic Worker House in DC and stuff like that. However, I really had trouble getting along with them because I guess it just turns out I'm not hippy dippy enough. You know, they were really hippie. Yeah, but anyway, so this was a really important book, and I can go and look up articles where she's talking about my grandfather, and I think that's pretty cool. In fact, in one, I think I gave everybody a link, or a link in the Voxer group anyway.
Yeah,
and I think in the Discord group as well.
Yeah, and she even mentioned my father and my aunt, and she must have been sitting there in his library. He has collected books by Jacques Maritain, who was a French kind of early 20th century philosopher or theologian, and John Henry Cardinal Newman, who my grandfather bought every book about Newman. I have so many of his books on John Henry Cardinal Newman. He was recently canonized a few years ago. So I couldn't believe it. It was like a 1937 article. And another one, she talks about how she sat with my grandmother during a talk somewhere or something. It just boggled my mind. And why did my parents never talk about her and that we had that connection? I really think it was because my father fought in World War II and she was a pacifist. And I think that my father was passionate about about the needing to defend ourselves in World War II. And he was not a pacifist, I guess. Not that he was aggressive. He didn't believe in, but so I think that's what didn't sit well. I really think that's what didn't sit well. And that's why they never talked about her, why I had to find out about her from my college advisor. That's just crazy that there was this breach somehow. Anyway.
That's such a cool story, Faith. That's so neat.
Yes, God was just holding that grace for the moment you needed
it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Emma, because maybe if you had known about her earlier, it wouldn't have been so impactful.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about like books. And then you don't really, a lot of times you don't really you only get part of it, or maybe you don't even get it at all until you're ready to actually see it. And that's the way it was like for me with a lot of C.S. Lewis stuff, because I read, I think, almost all of his fiction as a teen. And then when I revisited it and started reading him again, I was like, oh my gosh, it's like you just completely miss it. And I think that about books. I mean, just regular fiction too. I think sometimes I'll read a book and people like, especially when it gets, I read the negative reviews and then I'll read it and I'm thinking, how did you miss this? Like, this is like, there's some really good stuff in this. Like, how did you miss what was in here? You know what I mean? It's like, there's a lot of times that writers are saying like really significant things within the story that people just completely miss. But you have to be ready for it.
Rereading can be so rewarding. I mean, I read this a long time ago, couldn't remember, and now I've read it again. And this time, I really noticed how I really was bothered by her extolling the communists so much. Frankly, that was the thing that didn't jive with me.
Yeah. Absolutely. It was so funny because when I first read this, I didn't like sympathize with the political parts, but I was mostly just like, well, you know what? She has a different point of view. It's not my point of view, but you know, everyone's allowed to have their own point of view, which is true. Everyone's allowed to have their own point of view. But like rereading it like after the pandemic and just in 2024, it's like it feels like feminism and communism have just gone so wildly astray. And to a certain point, I feel like it's not fair because I'm sure the communism and feminism that she was fighting for, like, it was very different from the way I see it out in the world. So, but it's hard not to like, it's like I see where it went and I really think it went some very poor places because communists and feminists would probably hate a lot of her takes, ironically, even though she was. So yeah, I really wrestled with that, especially in the earlier parts of the book, because it felt like this is not sound, or I don't know, like, yeah, I wrestled with that a lot. I feel like towards the end of the book, you kind of could see the whole picture and see more of her heart, but especially towards the beginning, I just
Well, you know, the thing about like you know, communism as a whole, it was a reaction to, and I think it's important to remember, because it's like what you guys are talking about is that you see a thing and you think, okay, this thing is bad, so we're going to go this way. But it's really easy to swing off to an extreme and get off base if you don't have a grounding, right? If your grounding is a movement or an ideology, then you're going to take it wherever that ideology can get extreme if you don't have a grounding. But like communism as a whole, I think grew out of a reaction to the establishment of, you know, the
industrial
class, the classes in society. You know, first it's the aristocracy that are exploiting the people, but at least they had a little bit of they had
a corrupt aristocracy.
Yeah,
that
they
was
had an
exploiting people, because there were also like good leaders and good aristocracies, but the corrupt ones then.
And so at least there was some sort of obligation to the people that were supposed to be under their care, right? And then you're right, it goes into the Industrial Revolution, and then the whole thing is just all about money, and they're exploiting people, and there's no obligation. They don't think there's any obligation. And so this is a reaction. Like if you read Utopia by Thomas More, I mean, he's kind of earlier than that, but he's pointing out the ridiculousness of thinking that these people who are in these positions of power that have absolutely no they're just there by heredity. You know, they have no special skills. They're not, you know, they've done nothing to earn it. They just were born into it, and they think they have a right over other people. And so it's, you know, this is growing out a reaction to, and keep in mind that the aristocracy was basically backed up by the church for most of the years, right? They had the backing of the church. And then when you go into the Industrial Revolution and the after the Reformation, you have there's a book. It's called Church History in Plain Language. One of my professors at HCU was actually the editor of the 4th edition. But he said that the Protestant reformers courted the bourgeoisie, the merchant class, by downplaying the obligation to care for the poor, because with the Catholic Church and the aristocracy, there is a strong message of you care for those who are in need, right? And so the reformers went on after the merchant class, and they basically kind of sort of swept that under the rug. Like, you don't have to worry about that. Basically pandering to greed, honestly. And I just read something recently. I can't even remember where I read it. Luther actually kind of changed his theology based on politics. I mean, it was anyway. Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Sorry to break in. I really wanted to hear too what Victoria thought for our first question, or if you just have general thoughts about the book as well. Do you want to share that?
Sure. I was just gonna, going back to the topic we were just talking about. I think Christina hit the nail on the head. I think that Dorothy Day was at heart an idealist. I think it was the idealism of communism that appealed to her. But yeah, I think she was writing at a time when she maybe wouldn't have known what we know now, of course. So, but yeah, I agree. That's kind of how I read it as well.
Except I would accept that if she wrote the book in 1937. And anyway, they already did know what was going. I mean, they knew, but but it was written in 1952 at the height of or the beginning of the Big Red Scare. So she's saying really provocative things by quoting Mao Zedong and talking about how, extolling kind of.
Yeah.
So
quoting Mao Zedong was like, I don't know about that one.
If you have wisdom, you learn. So there was no saying, well, now we know that it really went all downhill. She didn't distinguish that these are certain ideas and these are great, but everything else sort of was. Instead, she just seemed to I felt like she had a loyalty to those first friends, because she was only 16, right? When she became a communist and she was off at college. I think she felt like she had to be loyal to those people. So she kept wanting to say, yeah, but they did good things. They wanted to work. They wanted to help the poor, even if it turned, into mass murder of millions. Their heart was in the right place, and I just felt like there was a little that just jarred. I just thought she should have been a little more a nuance, but I think it was just a blind spot for her, maybe. But that was the only part that, I loved her passion for the poor. I wish every single person, including myself, because the whole time I was reading, I was like, you coward, you middle-class coward. What was your radical love for the poor? Huh? I'm busy getting new wallpaper in my dining room, so all that voluntary poverty and just to live for others, and all her telling about just how difficult it is to live with people who are a mess, and all the different anecdotes she's telling about this person who went and did this crazy thing, or this person who wound up fighting with, or whatever. I think it was really hard to just take anybody in and try to live with them and try to help them. It's really, really, it was a true life of sacrifice. She really, really, I think she wasn't as good at the politics stuff, though.
It was beautiful to see her just the self-giving, and that and I feel like she was following the crazy call that God put in her, and we each have to follow that. So for her it was clearly to live with the poor. For others it might not be to live with the poor. It might be some other challenge, but she obviously found her way to what God was calling her to, and then just went for it.
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway from the long loneliness in general is just like why read your question, why I read the long loneliness. I think she was such a beautiful picture of like Christ at work in tangible ways, and that's all she wanted to do with her life was be like boots on the ground, feeding people soup. Like, what are the most basic needs that I can meet? That like she's so Christ-like in that way, and I really admire that. Even though she was also a very brilliant lady and an intellectual lady, that wasn't enough for her. She would give all that up just to have boots on the ground and just serve, talk to someone face to face. That's really what she was all about, and I just think that's just such a beautiful example and something that's just really inspiring.
Yeah, I feel like she refers to it as the works of mercy. Like that's like what she loves. I highlighted this passage. We have always acknowledged the primacy of the spiritual, and to have undertaken a life of silence. She's like kind of, questioning herself here. To have undertaken a life of silence, manual labor, and prayer might have been a better way, but I do not know. God gives us our temperaments, and in spite of my pacifism, it is natural for me to stand my ground, to continue in what actually amounts to a class war, using such weapons as the works of mercy for immediate means, to show our love and to alleviate suffering. So yeah, I feel like that is like she figured out her temperament, and but like the works of mercy were her main weapon, which is really beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
That was a good quote.
Again, low church question. Is that like, when you say works of mercy, is that actually like a defined term in Catholicism, or is that how you're describing something?
On Faith, correct me, I don't know the list myself, but I know like at a retreat I was at recently, they listed it was like giving to the poor. I think there is an official list.
There are. Wait a second, I can Google this. She actually lists them in the book. But yeah, there's
the corporal works of mercy.
Mercy, yeah.
Yeah, this is on the Catholic bishops.
And then there's the spiritual
Feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, shelter the homeless, visit the sick, visit the prisoners, bury the dead, give alms to the poor. So this is from Christ's teaching in the gospel, but according to the Catholic Church, those are the corporal works of mercy. Oh, 14.
And then she talks about the spiritual works, because when they in the Catholic Worker, they were admonishing other people. Oh, thank you, Carol. They were admonishing sinners, right? And they were instructing the ignorant through the work of the newspaper, right? So, so that's what the newspaper was about. That was part of their spiritual works of mercy as well. The spiritual works of mercy are instruct the ignorant, counsel the doubtful, admonish sinners, bear wrongs patiently, forgive offenses willingly, comfort the afflicted, and pray for the living and dead. So yeah.
Okay, but
does anybody else have?
Said it was 244. Is that what?
244.
But what is like?
Yeah.
What is that considered? Like I mean, not just the list, but like, is that considered? Is that considered
how you're Christ-like? How to be Christ-like?
Okay.
What one of the things God has called you to, and during Lent, actually, oh my gosh, I should know this. Like, it's one of you're called to give up a sacrifice, give up something. Is it
prayer, fasting, and alms?
Work of mercy? What?
Prayer, fasting, and alms.
Prayer, fasting, and alms. Okay, those are the three.
Those are the three things you're supposed to practice during Lent. So you pray more, you work on your prayer life more, you fast, you sacrifice, you give something up, you refrain from eating meat on certain days, like Ash Wednesday and Good Friday, and that sort of thing. And then alms, almsgiving, you take, you try to up your helping those less fortunate. So. And those are all like just practices to make you a better Christian, but you have these set times during the year where you're really, focusing on it. Yeah, you're really focusing on it in an intense way.
Yeah. You're meant to focus on it all the time. But yeah, it's like during Lent, then it's like you really buckle down.
Yeah.
Did you guys find yourself? Oh, I was go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Oh, just I was interested if anybody else had any lines they highlighted. But what were you gonna say?
If anybody has quotes, please. Yeah. Does anybody have a quote they want to share? I have one too.
I have one, but it wasn't her quote. She's quoting somebody. This is on page 265. There was a guy named Ammon, Ammon, and he had served in the same penitentiary as Alexander Berkman, who was the anarchist who tried to kill Carnegie's top guy, whatever. He went in, he was going to assassinate him. He was Emma Goldman's lover or whatever. Anyway, but this guy had served time with him, but he'd been really influenced by Gandhi, Jesus, and Tolstoy, I guess. And he wasn't Catholic. But when she was explaining to it, I guess there was a priest who knew the guy, and he said, he has seen so great a light, it has blinded him. So,
yes.
I thought that was a funny line.
That was great. Yeah, I didn't find myself laughing a whole lot while I was reading it, but that one was a funny one. Any other quotes anybody wants to share?
I really loved Peter. What was his last name?
Warren.
Yeah, I really loved him a lot. He was so quirky, and he didn't think in the same kind of polemical way that Dorothy Day seemed to think in. And he just struck me as like very early church kind of thinking. And I really liked him. And he said something like, eat what you raise and raise what you eat. Because I'm really into being a locavore, and like that's the way we can opt out of the industrial food system that causes so much harm and exploits people. It's terrible, and we all have to participate in it because we have to eat, right? But if we would all just try to be more local, and so he just struck me as a locavore and a kind of a communitarian, but in a very early church kind of way. So I really liked him a lot.
Like Dorothy Day, I feel like he was just thoroughly himself. He had found the personality God gave him, and just like, he was inspiring too. And I think Christina or someone mentioned before that his ideas were anti-interference of the state, which that's why I got confused reading this, because like first she's very communism, and then she describes Peter Morin's ideas, which are not. It's not the state doing it. It's small communities choosing to take care of each other. And I feel like, that is really inspiring. It was beautiful to hear she articulated that.
I think he was really, because the Servile State, I have not read it, but it was by Hilaire Belloc. Hilaire Belloc was good friends with G.K. Chesterton. And they developed this idea, although it's not developed very much, called distributism, which tried to find a middle ground between capitalism and communism or socialism. So it wanted what?
I liked that was about like personal responsibility too, because like it's like if with communism, if the state just imposes it, like you didn't have any personal responsibility, like it's you undertaking the responsibility for your community.
Yeah, I think, and that's where I think, because they were trying to do it, both of them were devout Catholics, they were trying to do it in terms of the church's social teaching. And so distributivism, it has a lot of problems though, and it's very undeveloped, but that's what it tries to do. It tries to do the middle ground, and he's very much Peter Morin really, I think, embraced that. And it is, you don't want this, because the trouble with the state, well, for one thing, communists were atheists, right? And they were persecuting Christians, right? So, and Jews. So you don't want that. And also when the state gets too much power, then it can, it's tyranny, right? I mean, fascism was on the rise, so you don't want the state doing everything. And so when he talked about the workers owning the means of production, he wasn't talking about it being the state that did it. He's talking about actually like pure communism, where it's actually the community that owns, the means of production.
So, distributism is actually the closest modern economic theory to the Jubilee system from Leviticus. The Jubilee system in Leviticus. because you know, a lot of times, like especially in America, people act like laissez-faire capitalism was given out Mount Sinai, which it's totally not. And it's actually, there was an economic system given out Mount Sinai, and the land, which was the what was used to produce, right? That was the main resource that was allocated to families, that was out to tribes, and there were judgments and curses against the people who did not honor that. You know, the principle is that everything is God's. He gives it to us to use. It was allocated to, the land was allocated to families based on the number of people, and they were to, if it was on a 50-year cycle. So if somebody sold land, they weren't really selling it. They weren't really, they had no right to sell it out of the family. It was basically kind of like a leasehold that would revert back to the original family after the 50-year period. And then there, in between that, there were the 7-year cycles where all debts were released. It was, they could not charge interest to fellow Jews. So when you look at that, it's really, it's an economic reset every 50 years. And when you look at, you know, the things that happened like right after the Industrial Revolution and the Gilded Age and all the robber barons, and you look at the writers that influenced Dorothy Day, like George Orwell and is it Jack London? Is it Jack London or John?
Yeah.
Oh, so anyways, what they were writing about they were looking at the mass exploitation of the poor by the very wealthy, and especially London. Which one was it? Who wrote The Iron Heel? Is that Jack London? Anyway, you could see what he saw coming. It's like, if this isn't corrected, this is a kind of chaos and destruction of society that's going to happen. And what you see in like different parts, there was a change in the US, right? The trusts were broken. There were more protections for the poor. There was more of a social safety net. And when you look biblically, there were social safety nets for the vulnerable. Like when they had the offerings, it wasn't just going and giving offerings. Those are resources that were given into the temple that fed the priests, right? The priests lived on. They didn't have their own. There weren't these mega pastors with millions and millions of dollars. The Levites did not have their own land.
Yeah.
They lived in cities, and they were supplied by the people who brought the sacrifices, but it wasn't only for them. It was also for the poor and the needy. So there was a welfare system built in. The whole thing with the gleaning, it was basically like, it would be like saying, you know, like a phone company saying, you need to provide 10% of what you put out. You need to give to, not lower cost, you need to give to the people that have the need for it. Mm-hmm. That would be a modern application of that principle of gleaning for the poor. So that is biblical. That's biblical. Mm-hmm. And so sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying that's so interesting. Like I wasn't familiar with that, like part of the Bible, that it's all laid out so specifically.
Yeah, because you see it with Ruth and Naomi.
Yeah.
You know, they go out and yeah, that's a really good point, Carla.
Yeah, and so I think distributivism, because it's more focused on local economies, and she talks about it, it is confusing. Was it Victoria that just said it was so confusing? Because at one point she's talking about the state, you know, communists, and the state owns everything. And then the next minute she's talking about, you know, well, the servile state, and we don't want, you know, we don't. So, I mean, it just seemed she was contradictory, but maybe she was just reporting what other, you know, everybody. But the anarchists, I find them confusing too. But basically, the anarchists want a decentralization. She was saying that's what they want. there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of overlap. The problem with, I think, is that you can't have the government owning the land. It has to be people. It has to be like, or you can't have big corporations in cahoots with the government owning all the land. It needs to be real people that own the land, and they need it so that they can have food and resources and to live. And so I think that's, I mean, I think back in the day, it was, the communists taking over everything. And now it's these global mega corporations taking over everything. It's just people at the top with all the power exploiting the people that don't have all the power. Yeah.
So the point about Acts, yeah, and also the Moravians were like that too. They had a big influence on the Wesleys, and they Count Zinzendorf. He was. He had a lot of influence on people that came after him. Kind of, if you go back and look up the chain of influences, he also influenced George MacDonald, who had influence on like Chesterton and Lewis and Tolkien. So anyway, they had, it wasn't a communism. People had things, but they just gave. And it said, this is what Jesus said, there shouldn't be anybody in need, right? There shouldn't be anybody in need. And so I guess this is one of the things that's come up recently. And it's difficult because you can't, you know what it is, Faith? It goes back to your whole comment about it has to be local, because you can't really know what the situation is if you don't know the people, right?
Yeah.
And so just giving, sometimes you do more harm than good, because you don't really, you're giving, but you don't really know like how it's going or where it's going, or if the need is actually there. Like where I live, they have some amazing nonprofits that help the poor. There's one called HAM, it's Humble Area Assistant Ministries. I've looked at some of the things they do. I cannot even believe the amount of stuff they do with such a relatively small budget. They have a few people on staff, a lot of volunteers, but not only do they focus on the local community, but they network with other local nonprofits. So if somebody's running a scam on something, they communicate with each other, and they know, okay, this person, yeah, you have to watch out for this person. You can't, we've already given this, so you have to, I think that's it. It has to be local. You have to know the people that you're trying to help.
We have somebody in our church who started this this nonprofit for homeless families, and she just did our county, and she did on such a little budget. They helped so many families. Like every year, it just got bigger and bigger, and it became a model. Like other states were coming in to see how she did this. And it was like you were saying, there were two workers, and then there was tons and tons of volunteers, and it just focuses on homeless families, which is mostly women and children. And then sometimes the woman is also taking care of her parents. So like and they're in terrible, they're either about to be evicted, like a lot of times they're about to be evicted, or they're homeless, and they figured out all these incredible strategies. They were so good because they would study the family. They would go in and they would talk to each of them and say, okay, what do you need? And they didn't just give them money, but like if the child was suffering emotionally because of, the traumatic things, they would get that child counseling. They would even do things like lessons on mothering, because the mother didn't know how to, because she has so much stress on her, right? And they just, we would get like an email or something saying, can you please drive this person to the doctor's today? Or does anybody have a bed? It turns out, she has to take in her sister because her sister's, you know what I mean? Does anybody have a bad thing? You know, like it was down to that level. And yet it became, over 10 years, it became like this model program that people were coming from, like people coming from New York to figure out how they did it so inexpensively. Like I think it cost them $16,000 to help a family to get back on their feet in 2 years. Like that's how they would track the family. It would be like a constant support, and it was amazing. It has an amazing track record. So, and it was just started. This woman literally started it in her basement. She took somebody in, and then it just went from there. But I think it's because it was so local, and because they really focused on the needs of the people, and they were tuned in to a huge network of volunteers that could come in and help at a moment's notice. You know, so it was, yeah, I think local is really. I mean, I think we probably do need like some nationwide infrastructure where people can. I mean, I'm not saying absolutely no to that, but I do think it's more effective. I think we should try harder at the local level and not just leave it all to, you know, sort of the faceless government that may or may not be doing things very efficiently or with any respect, or is bound to be corrupt, you know, in some way, on some level. So
there's a line from the book that I had highlighted that I feel like kind of speaks to this. The only answer in this life to the loneliness we are all bound to feel is community. The living together, working together, sharing together, loving God and loving our brother, and living close to him in community so we can show our love for him. And I do feel like you guys are making such good points. Like the small local communities are like what you have the power and like amount of attention to know thoroughly, because like it's easy to like just give to some faceless, you know, organization to make yourself feel better, but it's like that's like it's the person in front of you that like needs your grace that God has put there so that you can respond to them. And I do feel like in today's world, especially with the internet, it's like I think it's Jordan Peterson I've heard talk about this, how and others, just like the internet brings like everyone into your like mind space, which is like your brain doesn't have enough bandwidth to take in everyone and everyone's opinion. Like it's the people within your small community that you have the bandwidth to take in. And I do think it's like such a pity. I mean, there can be very, very good things about the internet, but like the people in front of you and like the real life connections, if you like just stay on the internet all the time because that's easier, like it's like the people, it's like the one-on-one interactions that can make an impact, that not, I don't know. I feel like everyone, it's easy to be a lurker, or like it's easier to just spend your evenings online when it's like, well, maybe you should go to church, or maybe you should go to that in-person thing, or sign up for that volunteer thing and like get to know the people in your area, even if they might be annoying, but it's like, that's your community. And I feel like this is something I've been challenging myself with recently too, to like make sure I'm not spending time online instead of putting energy into building a real life community. Or even like this. I feel like this is like so rewarding because it's like the five of us talking with each other one-on-one in live time, like rather than just scrolling through Twitter or Instagram, just reading things and not even responding. Like this kind of interaction is so wonderful, I think. So
yeah, and I think that for me,
you just can't take it all in. It's too big of a volume.
And for me, I felt very disenfranchised because nobody represents me, you know, politically. So I never feel like I have any, but I do think if you get involved in local stuff, like for me, it's the environment, like really low level stuff, like invasive species, or lawn care that's so polluting, and gas blowers and that sort of stuff. And I don't even do that much. Sometimes I'll do more, and then at other times in my life I can't be that involved. But I find just doing a little bit of it is a great antidote for me to like feeling cynical, because then you get to meet other people who they really care that, you know,
you go online and you feel alone. You feel like everyone's crazy. You're the only same.
Yeah, or I'm also through my church, I'm involved with the homeless ministry, and you meet people who really care. Like all they can do, these older women, all they can do is make a nice big casserole. They really want to do it, and take it to the homeless shelter. I mean, that's what they want to do. So it's you get to meet other people, and there's hope there. Whereas I feel like on the national level, it's so, we have no say. We have no say, and it's so controlled. And so I feel very, very disenfranchised that way, but I feel empowered when I'm involved locally.
Yeah, and Christina, isn't that Christina? Yeah, that's so true about that. It's not just the internet. I feel like the internet has taken it to a new level of, but before it always existed. It was always easier to theoretically deal with problems instead of concretely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Emma, there's like so much. I could write a whole essay on what you just said, but I did want to say, like, if you don't, I mean, this is the thing. You may think that you have like a ton of connections online, but if that person, the whole thing about community, like when, living in Kingwood, when you have this flooding, if somebody can't come and haul your butt out of your house when you're flooding, not really, that's not a friend. That's not a friend. You need some people that can actually be there for you.
I love that.
This is a true story. They had people getting their canoes and their paddle boats to get people out of their houses because the dam above us released in the middle of the night. I think it was like, I can't even remember now, but like it was like 90 miles a minute coming down the, I can't have been right. I don't know. It's super fast. All this water coming down. It was like a torpedo of water with no notice. And they literally had people, it was raining. They had people, they'd have to go in and get them out of their houses and leave them standing in the street in the rain. Mm-hmm. And they didn't have time to get emergency help. It was the people around them that helped them get out.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we see it like with FEMA. When FEMA couldn't come through for people who really needed it, it was like, well, how do you think they did have food and water to survive until FEMA got there? Probably somebody locally was prepared and able to help them,
Well, FEMA tells you you don't expect help for 3 days. That's how long it takes to mobilize in a good situation normally. And all of that, like in Ike, when it came and hit, there was actually the local Chamber of Commerce that was coordinating people to go out, and this is while the storm was still going on, coordinating people to go out and clear out the streets of the trees that had fallen, because they knew like wherever the electric the line trucks could get to, that's who was going to get electricity first. So as soon as it was safe, I mean, they were organizing while it was still going on. We had, like where I live, they didn't even have an emergency shelter in place. Again, it was the local Chamber of Commerce that coordinated something and got something arranged for people that needed a safe place to shelter. And they had, again, it was like as soon as it was safe to go out, they had people going out and clearing the streets so that they could get electricity back in. But it's like, if you, again, I mean, it does take the local community, like getting people together to go out. You can't just wait for somebody to come and do it for you.
That reminds me of another social teaching of the church, which has to do with solidarity and subsidiarity. And subsidiarity is, you go from the local out. It's not out in, but you go from the local out. And the solidarity is that everyone sees everyone as working together for the common good. And those are like these two principles of social justice in the Catholic framework. And that's what it is, because they can't get to you in time, like in 3 days. So it's got to be your next door neighbor that helps you out, or you help your next door neighbor out. I mean, that's just the way humanity is. That's so, yeah. Yeah.
I think with the other part of we have so much convenience that we don't need other people so much. We don't realize what we need, like we don't have, you just go to the grocery store and buy what you need, and your job, you go and you work and you get a paycheck, and it all seems very individual, that you think you're doing it all on your own. And you don't realize, even just with keeping yourself, in a home with electricity and water and going and picking up food, just how many people are involved just in that. Just in that. You have no idea like how many thousands of people are involved in those things that you think you're doing all yourself, and you're not.
I know. We learned.
Oh, go ahead, Christy.
I was just saying, we learned during COVID, how many steps it takes in the process to get even basic necessities. Yeah. So that really taught, I think, that taught me a lot anyways. But we're still having shortages here. But
yeah, I remember my grandson had been born and there was the baby formula shortage and my daughter can't breastfeed. So they were driving around like crazy trying to find this formula. I mean, it was just, and that went on for months. It went on for months and it was horribly expensive. I don't know how poor people did it. I mean, and you had to be able to go, like she had to go to 5 different grocery stores to finally track down the formula. I mean, it's just crazy. And there's some kids that need specialized formula, for health reasons. Well, what are they doing? I mean, yeah, it's really, so this is so weird, but I'm really into gardening, like I said, and I really love permaculture. Have you guys heard of permaculture? Because it's really, really could be so Christian. It's like these people were accidentally Christian, but they didn't know it. So what it is it's taking design systems and ecology, like the science of ecology, and combining them so that you work with nature, because nature is very, very successful. And if we emulate that, we come up with more abundance. And the whole principle, they're so beautiful and they're so life affirming. And one of them is that community, because you can't do everything yourself. You can do a lot yourself. We could be a lot more self-reliant, and that would be good, because then we wouldn't just be slaves to this, chain of stuff where people are being exploited in China because we need some wacky thing, from Target. And I mean, we're all involved in that, right? So we need to be more self-reliant, but we can never be completely self-reliant. That's not how humans work, right? But they also talk about resiliency and communities coming up with plans in case of emergencies. Like, does your neighborhood have a plan? Like, if there's a fire, how is your local community going to deal with emergencies? Because that's a way of taking care of each other, right? That's, so permaculture, it's really cool. Check it out. It's very, very wide. There's so much wisdom in it.
Now, we should probably start wrapping it up. We don't have to do it like right this second, but do you guys want to give some ending thoughts? Like, you want to start, Victoria?
Sure. I think it was interesting not knowing anything about Dorothy Day, and then this being a memoir, and you're hearing about her from her perspective, and I'm curious. I did go out and I went and looked up some like interviews and stuff I found on YouTube with her, because I was like, I really wanted to see her like talking, and to get more of a feel for who this person is, because I was like, as a memoir, I don't even know if we all represent ourselves accurately. Like, we're more accurately represented in community. So I was like, okay, I'm trying to like get a feel for who Dorothy Day was as a person. And I think she was so interesting at being also coming from this like journalist, like already very active in the world. I feel like a journalist, especially at that time, just really wanting to be in tune with reality and be like knowing the facts, knowing what real people are dealing with, and then coming to faith and taking that same concept into her faith was so cool. Because I think, I don't know, as like a person who's like grown up in the church and come to my own like disillusionment, and then coming back to the church, and seeing the church as like this idea, or more of this like the church that we think about as this esoteric kind of thing. Like Dorothy Day never saw the church that way. It seems she only saw it as a tangible, real people. And I think that that's just what I took away the most from reading her memoir. And yeah, just really made me think about how I can apply those principles as well and be more active, like you guys were talking about, be more active locally, be more active in my community with real people, and not just stuck in the ideas of religion and how religion affects the world and my community, but like how can we take those ideas and put them into practice is essentially what I got from learning about her life.
Yeah. Same. That's really
Beautiful.
Good. Yeah.
It made me think of from James would say faith without works is dead. Like they go hand in hand. If you have the faith, then you want to be like Jesus. If you want to be like Jesus, you got to go out and help everybody. You got to self-sacrifice. You got to love. And yeah. And it's really easy to just live in your head or make it this intellectual thing. For me, it's really easy. I'd rather just sit and read about it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think I'm the opposite of Dorothy Day, and that I'd rather just be in the headspace and where she was boots on the ground, kind of, like that's what I could really learn from her. And it made me feel guilty. It really did.
Same, because it's like really easy to kind of co-opt American cultural values, and like she totally rejected them. Success, she was not concerned about success, at all. She totally rejected material comforts, was like, I'm going to live in poverty because that's what the people around me that Jesus these are the people that Jesus walked with are the people, the workers. And she's like, that's what I need to, how can I save money when I know so many people with like dire needs, stuff like that. It's like, I love that she wasn't concerned at all about what the world thought, looking at their poor communes. She was only concerned about the people that she was feeding and clothing and living with and caring about and loving. So I loved that. How about you, Carla?
So the introduction on this was like, I really loved it. I didn't go back and look to see who wrote it.
It was Robert Coles.
Okay. Yeah. And he had heard her speak, right, when he was young. So this is something that he wrote in the introduction about what she said in one of the speeches. And she said, when I was your age, women couldn't vote and the poor could fall back on nothing but the charity of the rich. I remember as a girl asking my mother why things weren't better for people, why a few owned so much and many had little or nothing. She kept on telling me that there's no accounting for injustice. It just is. I guess I've spent my life trying to account for it and trying to change things just a little. And that is what I believe people like me ought to try to do. We've been given a leg up in the world. So why not try to help others get a little bit of a break too?
Yes. That's so great. Yeah. I just I could quote her we could just quote her. I feel like I could just quote her all day and it would be like a great live stream. We could just read directly from the book and it would be a great live stream. Thank you for that. How about you, Emma?
I loved what Victoria was saying about how, like, your idea of the church, that like it's not just this intellectual thing. It's like, no, actually it's the people. And because I feel that way about the church. Like if you just thought of it as like that actual Catholic hierarchy, like that would be terrible. Like it's your fellow people in the pews, not just who are there today, but who have been there through the past 2,000 years. Like I think she quoted a line from G.K. Chesterton of like, tradition is like the voice of our ancestors. So it's like, it's the saints. It's all of this whole big community of believers throughout time. And like, I definitely think you see that in here. But yeah, I loved seeing her like slow journey towards God, and just, it was beautiful. All the different elements that she included of like, this led me to this stage and this led me to this stage. I loved how she talked about how like when she was living with her not husband, but he loved like the natural world and like gardening and like ocean life, and that kind of led her to an appreciation of creation, which then led her to God. And I loved that. Yeah, just lots of different. It was a beautiful picture of just her journey, and so many different inspiring authors and lines and thoughts that I really enjoyed revisiting it.
That's awesome. I'm so glad. The introduction. We didn't even talk about that, but I know Carla really enjoyed the introduction as well. But we'll have to save that for another time.
Well, I think it was written by Robert Coles, who is a well-known Catholic publisher, writer. I mean, he used to be. I don't know if he is so much anymore, but he's done a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I
feel like this was such a fun. I feel like Dorothy Day would have approved of this discussion. Like, I feel like we touched on so many interesting things, like Catholic traditions and like, giving, like concrete instances of giving in your local community. And one thing that I really liked also is how she talked about like the need for ritual and how that, like, I don't know, I was just thinking that today at Palm Sunday Mass because there's lots of ritual and incense but the way she talks about like, you can't write that out of your life. And like, that was one of the things that brought her to the church, that she always loved that part of it. But yeah, just so many elements.
Yeah. Seeing her journey to faith was like, wow. That was probably one of my favorite things for sure about the book, was like how motherhood, like appreciation of nature and then motherhood is what brought her back to the church. And she recognized all the good things. I felt like, I don't know. I know that she was a writer and I know that she had strong opinions and convictions, but I feel like all of that mattered a lot less than like impressions to her. The way she writes is just like impression after impression that she knows she agrees with. And so she just kind of let that lead her back to faith. It was really refreshing to go along with her on her journey. Do you have any ending thoughts, Faith?
Well, I had two and one just flew out of my head, but also I'll just talk about the one. And this is just this is one of those Holy Spirit moments. My sister was saying that she was off visiting her husband's relatives, and the man has Alzheimer's, and he keeps trying to escape from the home that he's been put in because he's I guess he's kind of violent or whatever, and she said, if I ever get like that, just shoot me. And that's it. And then I mean, I'm sure she's just saying that as an emotional thing because it's so sad to see it. But then I was reading about Peter and his end, and after he passed away, they were saying, it makes me happy to think how everyone cared for him, everyone feeling honored to do so. And I have my youngest sister's Down syndrome, and she's deeply, profoundly Down syndrome, and she cannot take care of herself. We took care of her for years, and then she's in a home not very far away. And the caretakers are just hearts of gold. They just are wonderful. And the thing is, and why are those caretakers so joyful? The thing is, it's actually, I mean, it can be a terrible strain too, but if you have the right heart, it's a joy and a privilege to take care of somebody who needs care, who's so vulnerable and so dependent, and you are there. And I just feel like that my sister, I know she was just speaking emotionally, but I do think that's like the modern idea that people are burdens, and I don't ever want to lose my autonomy because then, it's like right now in Virginia, they're trying to pass this assisted suicide thing. And it's so opposite of Dorothy Day and of Christianity, because we are supposed to be here for one another. And
be humble enough to like let yourself be helped too, like both ways. Yeah,
right. I mean, I think it's because in modern culture, our identity is what we do and not what we are. And what we are children of God. I mean, if you believe, we're children of God, and we have dignity no matter what. We can't get rid of our dignity. It's there. It's inborn in us as humans. And so you don't have to have the worldly dignity to have dignity, and so we just need that. And so that was just a Holy Spirit moment where, like, I was just hearing this, and then I turned and I read this part. It was like it just hit me. But that's the problem with today, is that we're so utilitarian, and we're so into inventing ourselves, and and how loving is it to feel it was a privilege to take care of this man who was sick and had lost his ability to think, and that was a privilege. That's what we should think. That's part of sharing in the fact that Jesus died for us, that he didn't have to, that he went through all this humiliation to save us, and we can't extend a tiny fraction of that to other people who are in need. It just seems, I don't know, that really hit me, and that was just one little thing, but that was just something that really hit me.
Mm-hmm. That's I feel like that's the perfect place to end this live show. Thank you, Faith. That was perfect. Yeah, we've been going for like an hour and a half, so good job, everyone.
I hope we didn't bore. Is everyone gone? Like there's nobody watching.
We do appreciate every good job making it through the whole live stream. It was a long one, so thank you for hanging out with us. Thank you for commenting. And if you're watching this on replay as well, let us know your thoughts in the comments. And thank you again for everybody, all of the co-hosts. It's always wonderful to have our Lenten and Advent read-along. So thank you again for doing this.
Yeah, thank you, Chrissy. It's really a blessing.
Thank you.
For me as well. Yes, wonderful to see you all. And thank you for the Discord, Victoria, where people can check in throughout the reading experience.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for contributing. Everybody was really sharing some great thoughts.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll hopefully see you in Advent season again.
And have a wonderful Easter.
Yes. Wonderful
Blessed Holy Week to everyone.
Yes.
Yes.